You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 3. It's episode 21. Cubs have the number 2 farm system. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most subscribe to this podcast and follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter. Of course, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and email Crawly and I. Fly the W670 at gmail.com. Crawly, happy Sunday.
Yep, I am excited, Dustin, because the next time we record a podcast, I will be closing up my computer and heading to O'Hare.
O'Hare Field and out west.
Time to fly.
Gotcha. Time for you to fly and go check out the Cubs in person.
So it's going to be an absolute blast. Cannot wait.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to
you
bringing us some
time
great,
to do some scouting and we're going to have some fun content out there. I'll give you that much.
Absolutely. All right, Crawly, let's get to it. Since we were last together, Cubs have played a handful of spring training games, some ups, some downs, some draws, and some injuries we have to talk about as well. But let's go back to Thursday when they took on the Reds, and that was a game under the lights.
Game under the lights, a young lineup again. It seems like both nighttime lineups, they just let the young guys play. And they had a tough time against Hunter Greene and the Reds pitching staff. Hunter Greene's a really good pitcher. The Cubs only had 7 base runners the entire game, Dustin. 3 hits, 3 walks, and 1 base runner reached on an error. 2 of those hits and 1 of those walks, on that, and a runner reaching first on an error all happened in the first inning. So a lot of the base runners in the first. After the first inning, the Cubs only had 1 hit and 2 walks. But the first inning was fun with one out. Garrett Cooper drew a walk. And then Michael Busch showed off that big-time power we've been hearing about. He crushes a Hunter Greene fastball to center, almost hits the pitch clock. And the Cubs are up 2-0. The next batter, Jorge Alfaro, struck out, but Alexander Canario doubled to left. PCA would reach on an error and then steal a base to put runners at second and thirds with 2 outs. But David Bodie couldn't get him in. He flied out to end the threat. The Cubs had 2 base runners walk in the third, but couldn't cash that in. The Cubs would not have another base runner until the 7th when Luis Vasquez hit a 2-out double. That was the last of the Cubs base runners in the game. A lot of 0-first. Casey was 0 for 3. Alfaro 0 for 3. PCA 0 for 3, but he reached on that error. Bodie 0 for 3. Shaw 0 for 3. Michael Busch 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs with that first inning blast. Alexander Canario looked good, 1 for 2 with a double and a walk. And Luis Vasquez was 1 for 3. Dustin, we have been waiting for a good start from Hayden Wesneski, and for the most part, I thought he delivered, having one of his better starts of the spring. We talked about the need for Wesneski to get out left-handed batters, and of course, this is so baseball, Dustin. He gets out 3 tough lefties in the first inning, TJ Friedl, Ellie De La Cruz, and Will Benson. But the only righty he faced, Spencer Steer, hit a solo home run that, as of this podcast being recorded, still has not landed. Went over the left field jumbotron. But then Wesneski would give up a couple singles in the second, but also got 2 strikeouts and stranded the runners, worked a 1-2-3 inning in the third. So if you look at his line, Wesneski went 3 innings, gave up 3 hits, 1 run, no walks, and 4 Ks. You'll take that from Wesneski. Edwin Escobar, who the Cubs signed this offseason when he played in Japan for many years, gave up 2 walks to the first 2 base runners he faced, but didn't give up any hits. But the Reds were able to push in a run to tie the game. Michael Arias is a guy I'm really excited about. He gave up 2 hits, 1 walk, and 2 Ks in his spring debut. Left the game with the bases loaded and 2 walks. And then my guy, Cam Sanders, was called in to put out the fire. He struck out Mike Ford to end the threat. He came in the 6th and got the first 2 batters out, gave up 2 singles, but then it got a fly out to end the inning, finishing the night 1.2 innings pitch. He gave up no runs, 2 hits, 2 Ks. And like I keep talking about with Cam, no walks. That's the key.
No walks. Huge. Yep.
And then Riley Thompson and Jose Romero pitched scoreless innings, and the Cubs had to fly the T, 2-2 tie.
Fly the T. And I guess they got to get these night games in too, right? You have to practice because obviously they play plenty of night baseball as well as day games.
Absolutely. And it's a little, they shake things up a little bit. So, I think it's kind of fun. And then I know, for me, it's like I don't have to, I can watch the whole game and relax, not worry about anything. So, a little bit nice to get it. Now, Dustin, we had split squad games this weekend.
Yeah, Friday, right? Yeah, Friday afternoon, split squad affair.
Yeah, the Cubs did beat the Mariners 9-5. Shota Imanaga made his second start of the spring. He went 3 innings, gave up 2 runs on 4 hits. Another home run. He walked 2 batters and struck out 5. Dustin, you could see, though, he was working really hard on locating his fastball. shaking off Yan Gomes a lot. So they're definitely working on getting on the same page. Shota looked really strong in the first. He got 2 strikeouts. He struggled in the second, giving up a homer, a couple of singles, and a double to score 2 runs before looking really strong again in the third, just giving up a walk. Shota talked after his outing, and here's what he had to say about his start.
Working on throwing that fastball for strike up, and a couple of misses for balls, and then there's the home run. I want to continue to work on that. It was the same issue I had last time, so just continue to work on that, make adjustments. So I think it's just working on the skill of it. I've been throwing those fastballs to try to get ahead, get strikes, and I've been missing it a little bit. So just continue to work on that. Trying to locate the spots where, even if they do hit it, it's a foul ball, and then I can get a strike and get ahead in the count. So I think the difference is that the players, even like the little smaller players, they have a lot of power. And then the pitches that I miss my location, instead of being like a single, they can hit it out. So those two are probably the biggest difference.
I love that, Dustin, when he talks about here, he's talking about the fastball, but he's like, even the little guys in the United States, if you make a mistake, they're going to put it out. They got a lot of power. So that is a big difference between, what you see in the United States and what you see in Japan is that, they're not going to be singles. You make a mistake with a pitch, it doesn't matter. You got a guy like, even if you think about Nico Horner, who's not really a big guy, I mean, he could easily put one out.
Oh yeah. I mean, and listen, Nicky Madrigal hits home runs, right? Miles Mastrobuoni hits home runs. I mean, you get to this level of baseball and you can put the ball out of the park when it's in the right spot. There's no doubt about that.
Now, the next guy to come out of the pen for the Cubs was Blake Wyman. He struggled in his 1 inning of work. He got the first 2 batters out before giving up 4 hits. One of those, a 3-run homer to Cal Raleigh. Happens just that. But then after Wyman, the bullpen varsity team came in and shut down the Mariners. Merriweather, Quas, Leiter, and Little all pitched scoreless innings. They gave up a combined 2 hits, 1 walk, and 4 Ks in 4 innings of work. Dustin, so far, Merriweather, Quas, and Little have yet to give up a run this spring, so that's looking good.
Yeah, you can get used to that. That's for sure. That's a really great stat.
And then on offense, the Cubs were playing some long ball. Bottom of the first with Seiya hitting a single and Dansby drawing a walk. DH Garrett Cooper crushed a 3-run blast. The Cubs added 3 more hits in the second with a Canario single, a Matt Shaw triple, and an RBI single by Seiya. Cody Bellinger got his first hit of the spring when the pitcher came over late to cover the bag on an infield single. Counts anyway, right?
It still counts. Let's talk about Garrett Cooper really quick, Crawly. What do you see there? Is he a off the bench guy? Is that a trade thing? What do you think there?
Dustin, you had brought up earlier about the lack. You thought that there was an apparent lack of faith in Matt Mervis, and I'm starting to wonder, how much that might play into it. Of maybe giving Matt Mervis, releasing him, letting him try somewhere else where, just you got Michael Busch, you got Cooper, you got Dom Smith, you got a couple of guys, a lot of left-handed power. I think they're just trying to hedge their bets on this one.
All right, cover their backside, as we like to say.
Right. If Michael Busch doesn't sit there, and if you're going to have Chris Morel be in third base, and that's what you're going to go with, then you got a guy, and you need some DH pop. You could definitely have that with a lefty bat there with some of these guys like Cooper and Dom Smith.
All right, very good.
So we'll see what happens here. Dansby did have an RBI single to make it 6-2. The Cubs scored 3 more runs in the 6th with a home run by Dom Smith, who we were just talking about, his first of the spring, and then a 2-run homer by Matt Shaw, his first of the spring and his first in a Cubs uniform. And the Cubs led 9-5. Seiya was 2 for 3 with an RBI. Dansby 1 for 2 with a walk. Garrett Cooper and Dom Smith were 1 for 3, each of them with a home run. And Matt Shaw 2 for 3 with a triple and a homer. 3 RBIs, Dustin. Those are the hard ones to get, but you know what? I think he did a good job, and it was a fun time over at Sloan Park. Unfortunately, not as great over by playing the Diamondbacks. Cubs lost that one 7-5, but Kyle Hendricks was on the bump. He goes 3.1 innings, and he gives up 3 runs on 3 hits and 1 walk, 2 Ks, and a home run. The home run was hit by former Cub Jock Peterson. Kyle, though, you could see was clearly working on his curveball, a pitch that he usually doesn't use that much. He's, usually fastball changeup. According to Trib beat reporter Megan Montemurro, Hendricks threw 15 curveballs to only 2 changeups, right? And so when you look at that, this was the quote that Megan Montemurro had. She said, honestly, I was happy with this is Hendricks. Amaya and Talkman out in center said it's not popping out of my hand. I'm getting some good reactions just from the hitters. So it's good to see, and it's great to breed confidence in me the more I throw it. So, you could see he was working on things. So the results of the game probably don't worry you as much with Kyle on that one. Chris Clark came in with 1 out in the 4th and was only able to get 1 out. He gave up 4 runs on 6 hits with 1 K and threw a wild pitch. Now, during that inning, Dustin, Chris Clark's inning, there was a ball hit to Morel, and he could not make the play. And there was some question, is it going to be a hit? Is it going to be an error? They did rule it a hit, Dustin. But this is Megan Montemurro was at the game. It was not televised.
Right.
And here's what she had to say about this. She said, as someone who was at the road game today, Morel's error, which was originally ruled a hit, came on a hard hit ball at him that seemed to handcuff him a little, similar to Wednesday's error. He also made a fantastic diving play, shifted between second base, third base, laid out to right, got up and nailed the runner at first base. So, these are part of the growing pains that we're going to have with Christopher Morel, and, there's not much you can do about that.
No, or unless you're going to DH him, right? I mean, that's what you could do about it.
You could, but I think from everything that I've heard Craig Counsell say, this is going to be. I think they're going to give him a lot of leash, and I think they're going to try to make it work.
Yeah.
Frankie Scalzo is going to finish the inning, and Colton Brewer, Dick Lovelady, Sam McWilliams, and Brad Week all pitched scoreless innings. Cubs only had 5 hits in the game. Mike Talkman's looked really good this spring. He had a solo home run in the 4th to put the Cubs on the board. Cubs scored 3 more in the 5th on an error by the D-backs and a Brett Bateman 2-run double. And then Darius Hill hit a solo home run in the 9th. Cubs lose this one 7-5. Now, Dustin, I'm
glad the win was on TV as opposed to the loss not on TV. Because I enjoyed the game on Friday. I really did. It was fun. It was a fun watch. I really enjoyed watching it Friday afternoon.
100%. And then we get to Saturday, and I pulled my TV up. I got my popcorn ready. I want to see Jameson Taillon make his first start of the spring. He's had some issues with his calves. They've been taking him easy. But minutes before the game was set to start, he was scratched, right? And so Thomas Pannone was called on to start the game. Pannone was signed by the Cubs to a minor league contract in December. He was invited to camp as a non-roster invitee. He played in the Korean League in 2022 before signing with the Brewers in 23. He appeared in 1 game with Milwaukee in July and then was granted his release so he could go back and play in South Korea. Now, Pannone doesn't know until like 5 minutes before the game starts that he's going to be the starter.
Right.
He goes 3 innings. He gives up 1 hit, 1 walk, and struck out 2 batters. So not bad, right?
Right. Not bad.
He was followed by Edwards Jr., Alzolay, Neris, Almonte, Palencia, and Biggie. They worked a combined 6 innings, gave up 2 hits. Neris gave up a double, walked 1 run, and struck out 7 batters. Edwards and Alzolay still have not given up a run. Dustin, the more I see Carl Edwards, the more I think he might be making this team. I know there's a little bit of time left, but he has really impressed me.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it might not be like the first day, but he is going to be part of their plan, I believe, in the bullpen.
Now, on offense,
assuming he's got some options.
I would think that I'd have to double check that, but right. I would think that he may be someone that starts with the team, and if it doesn't work out, see what happens. They might go with the younger guys with the options and not use them right away. It would be more my thinking, but we'll see how that works out. But on offense, the Cubs only had 1 big inning, and that was the 3rd. With the bases loaded, Cody Bellinger was up to bat. He falls into a 0-2 hole, but then he comes through with a ground rule double to put the Cubs up 2-0. Remember about Scott Boras talking about his 2-strike approach, and he's a really good hitter with 2 strikes now in his ever since he came back to the Cubs. The Cubs loaded the bases again for Dom Smith, who he's known for his power, but he hit a little duck snort to score a run to make it 3-0. And Patrick Wisdom, back from the quad injury, hit a 2-run single. The Cubs were up 5-0. That's the final of the game. Nico Seiya and Bellinger were 1 for 3, while Dom Smith and Patrick Wisdom were both 2 for 3. And so, Dustin, that takes us to today. We now, with that injury to Killian that we talked about last time, and now Taillon, all eyes on Drew Smyly as he has an opportunity to return to the rotation, right? He lost his rotation spot last year, and the only thing you can do at this point in time, if you're him, is try to work his way back into it. And he really struggled the first couple outings. So obviously this is going to be a big one. And I don't care what you say. He's not a guy that you could just say, well, I'm working on pitches, because, he has to show the Cubs that he can be reliable. I thought that he did a really good job in the first inning. He had a nice one. He gave up a single, but he gave up a fly out, a ground out, and a strikeout. So first inning looks good. Second inning, I thought he looked great. He got a ground out and then 2 strikeouts. Now, the third inning really wasn't his fault. Now, he walked the leadoff batter, Josh Smith. That's his fault. He gets he gets a line out. That's 1 out. But then Marcus Semien grounds into a force out, and that was Miles Mastrobuoni to Chase Strumpf. And so they got the out at second, but not the out at first. If that was Dansby and Nico, that would have been a double play, inning over, right?
Yep, no doubt.
And so you wipe away that walk. Then Evan Carter singles on a line drive to right fielder Alexander Canario that moves Semien to second. So you got runners at first and second. But then on this play right here, Wyatt Langford singles on the ground to Christopher. It's a ball that I think Morel should have let go so that Mastrobuoni could have gotten it short. And then so Morel picks it up and he fires it to first, and Busch just saves it from being a run-scoring error. So a couple things that they're going to have to talk to Morel about on that play. That should have gone to Mastrobuoni, and he should have pocketed it. He wasn't going to get the out, and that almost would have cost a run right there. Luckily, with 2 outs and the bases loaded, Smiley was able to get Adolis Garcia to pop out, and so that ended the threat. And then Drew comes out in the 4th inning, and he gives up a single to Jonah Hyam, but then a strikeout, and that ends his day. So Dustin, I got to say, from what I was looking for in Smiley, 3.1 innings, he gave up 4 hits, 1 walk, 4 Ks. So the K numbers were look good. And again, half those hits wouldn't have occurred if it wasn't for some defensive lapses on the infield. So that's kind of the start that we were hoping to see from Drew Smiley.
Yep, we were hoping to see that, and I'm sure they were, meaning the Cubs management, and they were hoping as well. Because you're right, with those injuries, and it is a concern, and now all of a sudden, I don't think Taillon, no matter what, is going to be ready for opening weekend. I don't think he will. So, and you would think if everything were the way they had hoped, the way they had planned, that Jameson Taillon would be taking the ball in that series against the Rangers.
If not the Rangers, at least the Rockies, but he definitely would have been somewhere in that 1 through 5, and that's going to create a situation. So
right. So I would lay money down that he's not making his first scheduled start of the season at the very least.
Unfortunately not. The Cubs right now are leading the Rangers in the 5th inning, 1-0. Canario hit one to the left fielder who lost it in that famous high sky of Arizona.
High sky. Yep.
Literally hit him in the ribs. It looked like it hurt, and he scored. So that was a triple for Canario is how they scored it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know how you score that triple. But I'm not the official scorer, obviously.
Right. And so they may have changed it. You know how they kind of go back and forth with these things, but he scores on a sac fly by Christopher Morel. Michael Busch has hit a double. It still scored a triple. I'm looking at it right now from Candelario. So, not a lot of offense so far. We got a 1-0 game going on, but the main thing we wanted to see was how would Drew Smiley react with him having an absolute opportunity to get back in the rotation.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It's episode 21 of season number 3. And in this segment, Crawly is going to talk to our guy, Jim Callis, MLB Pipeline, to discuss the Cubs' number 2 rated farm system and this week's upcoming spring breakout game between the Cubs and the White Sox.
Joining me on the Fly the W podcast, I am happy to have back our friend Jim Callis. He is the senior writer for MLB Pipeline, and he's coming to us from Arizona. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited. I'll be heading down to Mesa shortly, and you just got there yourself. But hey, man, you have had no time to rest. You're doing this for now MLB Network. It's 30 camps in 15 days.
Yeah, they do like, I think it's an hour-long season preview show for every club. And I ran around Florida for 5 days. Then I came home for about 5 days. And then I headed out here to Arizona. And I'm doing the last 4 Arizona clubs. So I've already lost track of the days. Today's Sunday. I did the Guardians today. And then I've got Angels, A's, and Brewers, I believe, in that order for the last 3. And then got the spring breakout games, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Really look for that. I'll be doing the Cubs game on Marquee. It's always fun working with Elise Menaker and Lance Brzezowski. And I'm doing 2 games streaming with Jill Guerin on MLB Digital. So I think I have one day where I'm not broadcasting the game, but I'm going to pop into the Rockies booth on their regional sports network while they play the Diamondbacks, I believe. So my whole itinerary is all plotted out for me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you got much going on. Speaking of which, everybody gets excited this time of year when, the MLB pipeline releases their top ranked farm systems. It's what we all look forward to that every year. And, you've been doing this now as far as the MLB pipeline. You've been doing this since roughly around before 2015 was that first season. How difficult is it to kind of, take a look at all 30 teams and rank these minor league systems?
Well, it's the hardest ranking to do, really. And I was part of doing it for many years at Baseball America. So I probably ranked my first farm systems in 1989, my first full year BA. But no, it's like we put a lot of time into it. And so we don't take it lightly. But at the same time, realistically, to rank groups of 200 players in 30 different farm systems, it's very hard to do. So I'm not saying don't take our rankings seriously, but I think anybody who does this, whether it's Baseball America or ESPN or whoever else, Baseball Prospectus, The Athletic, whoever does it, Fangraphs, would tell you can't pinpoint it. I would say if you go back and look at it in 5 years, it'll be all over the place. I would say that in general, and this is pertinent to the Cubs, the first few teams at the top are generally the best farm systems. And then the last few teams at the bottom are generally the worst farm systems. And then if you took, say, the 20 teams in the middle and you looked 5 years from now, I think you'd see that, if we're measuring it by wins above replacement or you're just doing the eyeball test as to who's come out of those systems, it would be all jumbled up. It's just tough. And the crazy thing about it is I do think these rankings, I feel bad in a way. Again, we're not the only people who do them. I feel bad in a way because I do think more so than any other rankings, ownership of teams will let the front office know, hey, we ranked 18th in farm system rankings. What's going on? So it's just tough. And the joke I always make, Paul, is there's one team that always says, man, you guys got us perfectly nailed. And then 29 teams are like, you ranked us too low. But it's true. Because everybody loves their own prospects. Even the teams that have bad farm systems might acknowledge, okay, our farm system is not as strong as it's been. We have some really good talent at the lower levels. You're gonna see over the next couple of years. Nobody ever believes it's like your kids. Everybody loves their kids more than anybody else loves them, and teams are like that with prospects.
Well, like you said, that middle can be jumbled, but when you talk about the top rankings and you go back, and this is in your article, which we're going to tweet out when this episode comes out, you kind of show that the guys that were number one usually went on to have good things happen. And you started, pre-2015 with the Chicago Cubs. You had them ranked number one back then. And it don't, basically 2 years, not even 2 years later, they're World Series champions.
Yeah. And that, I've said this, I was saying back then, I still have never seen a team that had as many position prospects as the Cubs had at that point. They're pitching, what I think is the good news about the current system is they have more pitching now than they had then. But that Cubs team with all the young position players, led by Chris Bryant and Schwarber and Javi Baez, and the years run together. I can't remember if Ian Happ, they drafted him that year, if he was already in the, maybe they drafted, I think they drafted him that year, so maybe not. But they had more position players than they knew what to do with. They wound up trading Torres, they wound up trading Jimenez. Soler really never, established himself in Chicago and got traded. Those guys have all had very nice careers so far. But yeah, and going back to my days of Baseball America, almost every team that's ranked number one, they don't all win the World Series. If you look at the teams I've said, we started ranking farm systems at Pipeline, like you said, in pre-2015, and all the teams have been number one. We do it twice a year. Cubs won the World Series, Red Sox won the World Series, Dodgers won the World Series, Brewers set a franchise record with 4 straight playoff appearances, Braves won the World Series. The White Sox, it's not much of a record, but they set a franchise record with 2 straight playoff appearances. The Padres made 2 playoff appearances in 3 years. The Rays set a franchise record with 5 straight playoff appearances, and the Orioles, our most recent team, just won 101 games last year. But even going back to my Baseball America days, where they were ranking farm systems before I got there, like from 1989 when I started doing forward, there was like one year we had the Pirates number 1 in the 90s, and they're like everybody else who ever ranked number 1 wound up like at least having a string of playoff appearances. Like the Pirates were the one exception, and if we had started earlier at MLB Pipeline, like the Astros were probably the number 1 farm system for the Cubs. They won a World Series. The Royals had their number 1 farm system at one point. They won a World Series, and like again, it doesn't. The teams at the very top. When you like to rank at the top, obviously you have to have a lot of prospect talent. And like, I know, like just looking at it over the years, the teams that rank at the very top of these lists, whether it's our lists or other people who rank farm systems, the teams that rank at the very top, almost all without exception, are going to be playoff teams, in the next couple of years. And usually they're able to sustain the playoff run for at least a few years too. So, that's why the Orioles are still our number 1 team, but we have the Cubs number 2. And the nice thing is with the Cubs, that, it's not like they have a 60. They're not coming off a 60-win season where it's like, man, the Cubs are terrible. Like, how long is it going to take? Like, they already have a contender. I would think. I haven't looked at the official odds. I would think the Cubs, to me, should be the favorites in the NL Central right now, and they have the number 2 farm system in baseball. So I think that's really good news.
Well, you mentioned, Orioles are top, and they've been ranked, at the top at your midseason and preseason since 23, 22, but they had a long string of losing. I guess what impresses me about the Cubs system is, that rebuild really started in 2021, and in 2023, they just missed the playoffs. And at that same time, they built a farm system. So when I think back of those 2014, 15 Cubs, they lost a lot of games to get some of those high draft picks. You're talking 90, 89, 100 games. But somehow the Cubs have managed to build a top-tier farm system without those long stretches of losing that happened the last time the Cubs were at the top of the rankings. And the other thing is that they've done it with a combination of drafting, trading, international free agency. I really like how this team has been put together in the farm system.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. Like the farm system they had back in 2015 is much like the Orioles system today, where they were picking in the top 10 year after year after year, and they made a couple trades. And it's like, I mean, look, it's real easy to build a farm system. I mean, I'm not saying it's super, like it's automatic, but when you're picking, like the Orioles, 4 straight years, they took Adley Rutschman at number 1, Heston Kjerstad at, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, Heston Kjerstad at number 2, why am I forgetting the guy they took 5th outfield? Oh, Colton Cowser number 5. And then they came back and they took Jackson Holliday at number 1. And one of the years they took, I think it was 19. When they took Adley number 1, they had a large bonus pool, and they used that money to take Gunnar Henderson at the top of the second round, even though he was first round talent and slid. Yeah, and you're right about the Cubs. The thing that's impressive is the year that they did kind of like 2021, they're like, we got to rebuild. They actually went out and made some really nice trades. They got Pete Crow Armstrong from the Mets in the Javi Baez trade. At the time, I had a guy with another team say they could not believe that the Mets traded Pete Crow Armstrong for Javi Baez. So they just like, that was no disrespect to Javi Baez, but for like 2 months of Javi Baez, they couldn't believe they got Pete Crow Armstrong. They traded for Pete Crow Armstrong. The winter before, when they traded Yu Darvish, they got Owen Casey in that deal. And then when they traded Rizzo, they got Kevin Alcantara. They just recently, now this past offseason, trade for Michael Busch. They had to give up 2 interesting prospects for Michael Busch. They got Ben Brown for David Robertson. They got Alexander Canario for Chris Bryant. So like they actually, when they made all these trades, the Busch trade was more recent, but when they made all these trades when they were going into rebuilding mode, they actually hit on some pretty good prospects. And Casey was a really nice pull because Casey hadn't even made his pro debut at that point. And Pete Crow Armstrong, Pete Crow Armstrong was a first round pick, but he played 6 games. And like you said, they've drafted well. Cade Horton, I loved that pick at the time when they got him at number 7. Saving money allowed them to get Jackson Ferris, who I think is going to be a really good player, but they turned Jackson Ferris into Michael Busch, who I also think is going to be a solid regular. They got Matt Shaw last year with the 13th pick. And I don't quite understand why he lasted 13 picks, because the way everybody else in baseball, our teams talk about him, it's like, well, a bunch of you guys had a shot to take him, and nobody did. And like you said, I think you're going to start seeing the international department make an impact. Moises Ballesteros in a couple of years. Jefferson Rojas, I think, could have a big breakout year. Fernando Cruz. Michael Arias is a really interesting pitcher they signed after the Blue Jays released him as an infielder. So you're right. I mean, they're hitting on all cylinders. And the nice thing where you feel like they can maybe keep this going is they're not going to probably be in a position where they're trading veterans for prospects anytime soon. So they aren't necessarily going to have the trades, but they've drafted well and they've done well internationally without ever really hitting rock bottom for 3 or 4 years in a row. And so theoretically, they could continue to do that under Dan Kantrovitz and Leo Howa. They could continue to do that.
And I will tell you, the one thing when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning it. I mean, like you talked to me back in 2014, 2015, 2013, 2014. I could have listed you 15 to 16 position players, no problem. But I could, I struggled to find a pitcher like, who's there. I love the mix of the Cubs talent as far as having position players and pitchers coming up. And, we just saw an injury we don't know how bad it is as far as Jameson Taillon, but it doesn't absolutely tank the season because there are so many young kids that could step up and kind of help out in a pinch.
No, you're right. I mean, it's funny. I had to go look back. So like in that pre-2015 top 30 where they were loaded with position players, and I'd even forgotten, like guys like Jeimer Candelario and Dan Vogelbach, I had ranked 16th or 15th and 16th in the system. Victor Caratini, who's had a long career, was ranked 19th. I mean, they were just loaded. And they had, if you look back, they actually had Dylan Cease and Justin Steele in the system, but they were super young. Cease was coming off Tommy John surgery. But like the best pitchers were guys like C.J. Edwards, Dwayne Underwood, Pierce Johnson, Jake Stinnett, Jen-Ho Sang. I mean, they weren't their top guys. I think C.J. Edwards was a top 100 prospect. But now, I mean, I think Cade Horton's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. You got Jordan Wicks, who's going to graduate off the list pretty soon, has already had some success in the big leagues. Ben Brown's got like just crazy breaking stuff. Arias has crazy stuff. Luke Little's already been in the big leagues. I think you're going to see Drew Gray take a step forward. I think you feel better about the group of pitching prospects they have in the system now than they, if you're comparing them to when they were ranked number one. I guess it's 9 years ago now.
And it really is exciting to see the top 100 prospects. The Cubs have PCA at 16, Horton at 26, Casey at 47, Busch at 51, and then you got Shaw at 54, Alcantara at 65, and Triantos at 73. And there's a lot of guys that are right on that fringe of that top 100 as well. So it's definitely exciting. But Jim, when I looked at your list, the thing that kind of stood out to me too is that the Brewers were number 3. You had the Pirates and the Reds are in the top 10 as well. Pirates 9, and I think the Reds 10. So that's 4 NL Central teams that have top 10 farm systems. Do you see maybe in, let's say, 3 to 4 years, the NL Central being one of considered like the AL East or something like that, being a power division?
It could be. I mean, I think the biggest difference between two divisions is I don't think you have as big – the teams don't spend as much money in the NL Central. And so I don't think you'll necessarily import free agents. But, I mean, the Brewers are absolutely loaded. And, like, a bunch of their guys, like, they have 5 top 100 prospects in Jackson Churio and Jacob Mizorowski and Jefferson Caro and Tyler Black and Joey Ortiz. And all those guys could be in the big leagues this year. So you're going to see the impact there. The Pirates have gotten some young position players to big leagues. Now they have some pitching coming led by Paul Skeens and Jared Jones and Anthony Solomito and Bubba Chandler. I think, they have enough pitching depth. Enough of those guys should pan out. And then the Reds, we saw the Reds have promoted a ton of position players last year. And they got pitchers like Rhett Lauder and Connor Phillips and Chase Petty coming. I saw Chase Petty pitch today on the backfields, and he looked pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, I could see a scenario where, maybe the NL Central is producing, I don't know if they're going to produce 3 wild cards, but like the NL Central could be, have 3 playoff. You have a division champion and 2 wild cards, in a lot of years, because I do think that there's no question that in terms of prospect talent, the NL Central is the best division, I think, pretty easily right now. I don't know that any of the other divisions have more than 2 teams in the top 10, and the NL Central has 4.
Now, Jim, obviously, you're there, you're checking out all the camps, but you mentioned earlier, you're going to be a big part of these spring breakout games. And I got to tell you, Jim, I don't know whose idea that was at MLB, but they deserve
I can tell you.
Tell me.
They do a thing in MLB every year called Content Con, where basically people are, you come up with ideas and then it's kind of a competition. And it was Jason Ratliff, who is kind of like, he basically runs MLB Pipeline, and it was his idea, and it was a cool idea. And I'll admit, like, logistically, so I assume most of your fans know what it is, but essentially you're going to have each team is going to play a game, like an all prospect game. Like the Cubs are playing the White Sox. It'll be Cubs prospects versus White Sox prospects. And they're doing this cross baseball March 14 to 17. And because there's an odd number of teams in Arizona and Florida, the Reds are actually playing 2 of these games, and the Cardinals are playing 2 of these games. So NL Central teams right there. And this was Jason Ratliff's idea. Like he kind of spearheaded it in Content Con. And I don't know if we'll get to this point, but it was initially pitched as a tournament where you'd have like one winner in each like Grapefruit League, Cactus League. And like the logistics that had to be pulled off to even do like one game, were pretty impressive. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. You got to figure out who's pitching and who's available. And, MLB pretty much asked teams, make all your top 30 prospects like if guys are on the 40-man roster, it's up to them. But I think if you look at the rosters, I know it's 71. We have 71 or 72 of the top 100 prospects in baseball are going to play in these games. And the first game, which will be on MLB Network, will be Pirates, Orioles, Paul Skeens versus Jackson Holiday. It might be the first leadoff batter of the game. Best pitcher in the game, best pitching prospect in the game, best hitting prospect in the game. But there's like something like 550 top 30 prospects. So essentially, teams were encouraged, get your top 30 prospects to the game. If guys are on the 40-man roster, it's up to them. Like they get to decide. And if they're in big league camp, I think teams are not messing around. Like if guys are still in big league camp trying to make the team, they're not going to be in prospect game. But one of the cool things for the Cubs is Pete Crow Armstrong, after he got sent down to minor league camp, Pete Crow Armstrong said, yes, I want to play in this game. So the Cubs will actually, you'll see 6 of their 7 top 100 prospects play on, was it Friday? I guess
on Friday. Yes, sir.
Friday against the White Sox. The only one who's not is Michael Busch, who's probably going to make the opening day roster. But the buy-in on participating players is tremendous. And, again, it may take a few years. The logistics would be exponentially greater to play multiple games, but like maybe one day we'll see it as a tournament, which I would guess would have to be, I don't think they'd play 4 days in a row, but you'd play 2, like maybe you'd play 2 games one weekend and 2 games the next for the teams to get to the Final Four. And that could be kind of cool because like there's talk to like trying to, like if they had a tournament that you'd incentivize teams, and I'm not saying this will happen, it's just been discussed, you'd incentivize teams by whoever wins, like the Grapefruit League tournament, the Cactus League tournament, would get a pick at the end of the first round and a bonus pick in the draft. In which case, you would have the teams buying in even more. And it's funny, I was talking to a couple of farm directors, and they're like, "Well, if that's the case, and like especially like if you get to the Final Four, of your tournament, then you might." I'm not saying this would happen. Just give you an example, Cub-centric example. You might see the Cubs say, "It's Jordan Wicks' day to pitch. Jordan Wicks, go pitch 6 innings in the Spring Breakout semifinals. We're going to, and like, Michael Busch, you're going to go play in these two, like, I think you'd see teams going all in to try to win that pick. Like, it would be, there'd be a lot more logistics. And I don't know if that'll happen, but anyway, I'm rambling because I am excited about this, but it was Jason Ratliff kind of had this idea, and so many people who work for clubs had to work hard to just figure out who's going to this game, how are we going to make this work. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the Cubs White Sox Spring Breakout game on Friday, and it's going to be 3:00 local time in Illinois, and it's going to be 1:00 over in Arizona. But like you said, you take a look at these prospects, and there's just so many great names on here, and PCA is not even on here. He's going to be in there. But think about just the outfielders alone: Kevin Alcantara, Owen Casey, Brennan Davis, Christian Franklin, and PCA. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And so I think this kind of gets people excited about what's going to come in the future. It's a good introduction for maybe fans who are maybe a little bit more casual to get to know some of these talented kids that these minor league teams or these major league teams have drafted, developed. It's just going to be absolutely fun. And not only that, Jim, you are going to be calling the game with your Road to Wrigley compatriots. For those of you that have never seen it on Marquee, Road to Wrigley is a show where it's a whip around with the 4 different franchises, the minor league affiliates, the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, the South Bend Cubs, the Tennessee Smokies, and the Iowa Cubs. And then you guys go from game to game and you highlight different matchups. So you, Elise Menaker, and Lance Bronzdowski, you're going to be having that call on Friday. And so it got to be fun for you to be working with them again.
It was so much fun doing that show. And it's funny because it's usually 2 hours. I think a couple of years ago, the first year we did it, when we were doing it during the playoffs. And I think almost all the Cubs teams, maybe all 4, were in the playoffs. We went late so we could show the end of games. But like, it's so fun. And I swear, it's like, I always like to over prepare. And like, I swear every time we do one of those shows, I start and I'm like, oh, I hope I have enough to say. And like, we do a lot of them, like when I'm like crushed by, draft prep, or, like we're doing during summer. It's like, oh, I hope I have enough good things to say. And then like, we'll get like 5 minutes in and I'm still thinking that. And then I'll look up and it'll be like, we're wrapping up the show. It's just like, it's so much fun talking to Elise and Lance. Like 2 hours goes by, like, and it seems like I said, it seems like it's 10 minutes and we never run out of things to say. We have fun with it. There's usually hijinks going on with some promotion at one of the ballparks, which is fun. And, again, getting back to how loaded the Cubs are, there's always, like, almost every one of the games, there's a good prospect. And you were just mentioning the outfield. I was just thinking the infield. I mean, you could probably roll out. I don't know how they're going to do it, but you could go Hayden McGeary at first. I guess Triantos at second, Matt Shaw at short, Jefferson Rojas. I hope we get to see him. That'll be the first glimpse for a lot of Cubs fans. Although I take that back because he was on Road to Wrigley because they had him in high A last year at age 18. BJ Murray at third. I mean, they're going to have, as stacked a lineup as is out there. I don't know what the pitching plan is. I'm rooting for that we get to see Cade Horton. I don't know how pitching's lined up. A lot of teams are like, as you know, like you're setting up your pitching all spring, your minor leaguers, who's pitching, who's throwing bullpens what day, who's pitching what day. So I think a lot of teams are whoever's day it is to throw that day, are they're going to pitch that day, as opposed to we're going to rearrange our whole schedule because it will throw a bunch of guys off. So and there are a couple teams I think have set it up so their best guys can pitch on that day, but I'm not sure what the Cubs are doing. But man, I really hope we get to see Cade Horton. But I would submit the Cubs have. I cannot imagine there's going to be anybody with a deeper prospect lineup than the Cubs are to start that game, because you're going to have, I would think, 5 top 100 prospects in it, and I would assume Moises Ballesteros would start the game at catcher, and he didn't. He was our top non-top 100 prospect. So I mean, they're going to have 6 guys who got support, but Ballesteros and Rojas got support for the top 100 prospects list. So their lineup is probably going to include 5 top 100 guys and 2 more guys who are just in the discussion. And nobody's going to be able to match that. It's going to be so much. It's going to be fun watching those guys. The White Sox have some super interesting guys too, like Colson Montgomery and Noah Schultz, who's a Illinois high school kid who's just got nasty stuff from the left side. That game is going to be a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah, your compatriot Sam Dykstra was writing about the 10 best player matchups, and that's who mentioned as far as that game, Colson Montgomery versus Cade Horton. So like I said, this has got to be just such a fun time for you to be out in Arizona and to be a part of all of this. It's really exciting. And Jim, I think you guys really, I'm not saying this just because Cubs are number 2, but I thought it was a really great list. And I'm just so happy as a Cub fan to see just the progress they made. And I keep telling Cubs fan, the future looks bright. And now it just seems like more and more the future looks like it's here. It's right there. It's bubbling up. Yeah.
And like I said, the good news is they already have a good team. It's not like the 2015 Cubs are like, man, this team's got a lot of holes. There's a lot of work to do. Because what happened then doesn't usually happen, where almost all their best prospects became good big league players. Like that usually doesn't quite happen that way. It happens more often with hitters and pitchers, and they were very hitter heavy. But it's crazy looking back at how loaded that farm system was and how many guys became big league regulars, just even off the top half of that list, it's looking back, Chris Bryant, Aston Russell, Jorge Soler, Kyle Schwarber, Albert Almora got like some run in the big leagues, Gleyber Torres, Eloy Jimenez, Jamer Candelario, and Dan Vogelbach, and Victor Caratini. I don't know how many guys I just named, but that was just guys in their top 20 on that prospect list, and it was loaded. But yeah, they're in really good shape, I think. And it's going to be fun to see what becomes of these guys. I'll be curious. I went to Mesa for like 2 minutes the other day because I had to pick up my BBWAA credential on my way to another park. So I didn't set foot, but Jared Banner, who's assistant GM of the Cubs, used to be the farm director, now he's assistant GM, always likes to give me a hard time. So I'm very curious if he's going to give me a hard time for not ranking him number one. Because we'll see. And I don't know, Paul, if you listen to your podcast, but I'll be very curious. Next time I'll report if I run into Jared on Friday, if he gives me a little bit of a hard time because he thinks they should be number one instead of number two.
Jared's been on the podcast before,
Yeah.
so I hope he's listening to this one. And Dan Kantrovitz has been on the podcast, and I hope he listens to this one as well because it was a lot of fun. Jim, where can our listeners follow you on the socials?
Yeah, so you know what? I'm pretty much only on one. I've never. Well, I have an Instagram account I don't use just in case Twitter collapses. I was setting up for. I can't. What was Instagram's answer to Twitter going to be?
Threads.
Thread. So I set up Instagram when Twitter looked like it was going to just completely die. I have an Instagram account I don't use. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm on Twitter at Jim Callis MLB. And I usually try to tweet out anytime I have a story or we do something cool at MLB Pipeline. And I always plug MLB Pipeline. I think one of the cool things about our site is I think we do really good work, for one. But two, it's all free. And I'm not knocking anybody who has a pay model because you got to make your money somehow. But, MLB.com exists, to some degree to promote the game. You could buy tickets. I mean, MLB.com makes money too. But like everything's free. All of our scouting reports, all of our video, all of our analysis, everything is 100% free. You don't need a password to access any of it. So I think that's a pretty cool feature of our site.
I absolutely agree with you. Anybody can watch it, whether you have a lot of money or little money. It's all free, so you can really learn about these players. Jim, thanks so much for jumping on, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday at Mesa for Spring Breakout.
No, I am too. I cannot be more excited about Spring Break. I was on MLB Network the other day, just talking about. I got to preview the NL East clubs, and Harold Reynolds asked me how excited I was, and I said, and I've done the futures game with Harold, so Harold knows I love the futures game. And I was like, this is like 16 futures games, like it really is. Like I'm not gonna be able to go to all of them, but it's like 16 futures games. And I just think and I believe all the games are on at least MLB Digital. Like there's 6 games on MLB Network. There's, I think, a bunch on ESPN Plus, maybe 9 you can watch on ESPN Plus. And I think they're all, you can stream through MLB.com or MLB TV or the MLB app. I think one of them might be audio only, but the last I checked, I think all the games will be broadcast. Like I said, 15 of them with video. So it's pretty cool. You're a fan of any team, you can watch a bunch of your best prospects play. And we'll look back, probably 10 years from now and realize there might be something like 400 or 500 future big leaguers who play in these games. This year, it's going to be an amazing amount of players that go on to play in the big leagues.
Well, Jim, the passion that you have for it, it just comes through in this interview. And again, thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks, Paul.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It's episode 21 of season number 3. Don't forget to download. Don't forget to review. Don't forget to subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. And don't forget to leave Crawly and I one of them 5-star reviews. Crawly, we mentioned it in the first segment of the show, but we got some injuries that we got to get a little bit deeper into here.
Yeah, I think we talked about it on the last podcast. I think we called it the Cubs injuries, and they're starting to pile up, which has me a little bit nervous, just going to say that. As we take a look, Caleb Killian was diagnosed with the teres major strain in his right shoulder. He is not expected to return to game action until after the All-Star break. Dustin, once he comes back, I'm sure he'll go to the minors, and I don't know how much he's going to be helping the big league club this season, which is really difficult because he looked really good so far in the spring. We talked a little bit about Jameson Taillon. He scratched for lower back tightness, and the next day Counsell was asked today about the status, and he said probably not the improvement we were hoping for. Next steps are diagnostics and testing. So, those are two names that, like I said, one guy that was in competition for the fifth starter spot, another guy that you had penciled into the rotation 1 through 4, I would say penned into the rotation. And then so Cubs are, they're going to have to tap into that depth early. And what worries you a little bit about this, Dustin, is that idea of, giving Shota Imanaga, using days to give him extra rest. I mean,
Right.
What's going to happen?
Well,
with that,
at least in the beginning of the season, you do have quite a few days off at the beginning, right? And they are deep. And because these injuries are happening when they're happening, you have the opportunity to stretch some guys out that you may have had pegged for the bullpen that now you might have to have in a starting role, at least to start. So a guy like Javier Assad, perhaps, right? It might have to make a start. Jordan Wicks, who was right there on the edge probably of a starter or a bullpen guy. And now some of the bullpen guys that maybe were going to get sent down or get cut will make this team coming out of spring.
Yep, there's a lot we're going to have to kind of be watching closely these next couple of weeks. Speaking of which, Dustin, we got to our first round of cuts. And that came out on Friday. So if you were paying attention and you're kind of going like, oh my God, I can't believe they cut this player or that player. I mean, the guys that they cut were not going to make the team. A lot of these guys were getting experiences working with the big league camp, big league coaches, big league rosters. And so when we kind of take a look at the first round of cuts here, that was on Friday. Ben Brown, Luis Vasquez, Brennan Davis, PCA. I'll be honest, Dustin, that kind of surprised me. That was
a little soon, right? I mean, a little soon. So that just means that they're not comfortable with his hitting yet, and they want him to get 5 at bats a day down in Iowa.
Right. I think that the Cody Bellinger signing, I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall on that one. And so I don't think there's anything PCA could have done. I think there's more development. And here's the thing, again, I keep harping on this, but he's only 21 years old. And in the major leagues, when they find out what your weakness is, and when you're talking about PCA, you're talking about the fastball high in the zone. If they're going to keep pounding you until they show that you can do something about that. And so, I think that this gives PCA a chance to go. We know where these guys are going. Ben Brown, Luis Vasquez, PCA, and Brennan Davis are all going. They're optioned to AAA Iowa. So that is where they will start the season as of right now. Right-handed pitcher Michael Arias and Porter Hodge, along with outfielder Kevin Alcantara, have been optioned to AA Tennessee. That's exactly where I thought they would be. Kevin Alcantara came up really late. Last year, he did play for Tennessee. Porter Hodge has been on the podcast. Michael Arias is a guy that I liked. He played a little bit. He started the first half with Myrtle Beach and then played the second half with Tennessee. So he'll get a full season there unless the Cubs call him up. He's a guy that really has some pretty electric stuff that could come out of the pen and really impress people. 5 non-roster invitees have been assigned to minor league camp. That's right-handed pitcher Ethan Roberts coming back from Tommy John surgery. We never saw him in a game. Riley Thompson, catcher Pablo Aliendo, infielder Matt Shaw, and outfielder Owen Casey. Owen has not played really much AAA yet. Matt Shaw, again, he flew through the system. He ended up going through low A and then high A, and then he finished the season in Tennessee. But that was really like the last couple of weeks of the Tennessee Smoky season. So they've been assigned to minor league camp. So the Cubs are not saying where they're going to start the season yet. They don't know. So that move cut the spring roster down to 50 players. I think there were 60, from 62 to 50. So they dropped 12 players. So the Cubs then had 3 additional cuts the next day. All pitchers, Chris Clark, Sam McWilliams, and Brad Week. We know Chris Clark has been in the Cubs minor league system a while. Sam McWilliams is kind of a reclamation project that they signed this offseason, and Brad Wick is coming back from injuries. So that gets the spring roster down to 47. Again, that march to try to get to 26 players. We'll see what happens.
Keep an eye on it. There's no doubt about that.
Dustin, this one kind of really, really makes me excited. We have Craig Counsell announced the 2024 opening day starter, Justin Steele.
Well
And
deserved. Well deserved. Good call. Get it out of the way. Stop the questioning. Get it out there. You could have given it to Kyle Hendricks, but I like this move.
And here you go. Here's Chris Kompka, we talked about this. He's big free agent signing for Marquee Network. He
New addition. Yeah.
Brings out this this one. Justin Steele will be the first lefty drafted by the Cubs to start on opening day. How about that one?
That's a good stat. That's a really good stat. I don't know how he looks all this stuff up, but it's pretty impressive.
He's a wizard. Here's what Justin had to say about being the starter.
What did it mean to you when you were told you'd be the opening day starter?
It's awesome. It's obviously just a great accomplishment. It's really makes me just think back on the road that it took to get here. 7 years in the minor leagues, not a traditional path. Coming out of high school, young age and stuff. It just kind of made me reminisce a little bit, appreciate the long road that it took for me to get here. And it's obviously, just a lot of emotions. It feels great. It's quite the honor. And I'm looking forward to opening day, and let's make it a special season,
How did you get the news?
Counsel just called me into his office. It was just me and him. It was good.
What did he emphasize in that conversation?
Kind of the things I was saying. He was just reinforcing that it's something that is earned, and it's something that I should be proud of, look back on, and think about the road that it took to get here and all that good stuff. It was an awesome conversation, and it was something I'll never forget.
What an awesome moment, and Craig Counsell, like you said, not letting this linger. Let's just get it out of the way. And he did earn it. And I hope that people learn from this. I've seen people, Dustin, and I talked to Jim Callis about the top 30 prospect list, and people are telling me, and Casey's better than PCA, or Matt Shaw's better than PCA. Don't do that. They look at a lot of things. This is a spring training right now is a 2-week sample is what we've seen from these guys. A 2-week sample. That's not to say that Matt Shaw might not be better than PCA, or Owen Casey in the future might not be better than PCA. But understand, when you talk about a guy like Justin Steele, he wasn't, and he was back and forth from that top 30 prospect list. It was in 2014, Dustin, he was drafted, and he's getting his first opening day start in 2024, 10 years later. He had to deal with setbacks. He had to deal with injuries. These things happen. Let these prospects develop. Let's not just go boom and bust every time they do something good or something bad. That's just my opinion on it.
Totally agree. I agree with everything you just said there, Crawly. No doubt about it.
And how cool is this, Dustin? People talked a lot of smack about, Marcus Stroman. This is what he put on his Instagram. It's a picture of him hugging Justin Steele when they found out they made the All-Star game. And Marcus Stroman write down, Cy Steele. You don't have to do that. You know what I mean? How cool is that?
Yeah, very cool. He gets it. He totally gets it.
Now, Dustin, we do have some other news from the NL Central. How about the Cardinals? That team that Pacoda loves so much are continuing to deal with injuries. We talked about the Sonny Gray injury, right? Hamstring strain. Now they found out that Tommy Edman, who was supposed to come back, he had some surgery in the offseason on his wrist, supposed to be their everyday center fielder. He hasn't recovered from that wrist surgery as expected and does not appear to be ready opening day. Not only that, our favorite candy bar, Lars Nootbaar, with that creamy nougat middle, he was scheduled to be their opening day left fielder. He has 2 non-displaced rib fractures. So, you take a look at that, Dustin. That's the Cardinals are going to be without 2/3 of their what they thought was going to be their starting outfield.
Yeah. Boo-hoo.
Yeah, the tears are cut. If you're watching on 670 The Score YouTube channel, you can see Dustin's
pass
tears.
The Kleenex. All right, pass the Kleenex. Here we go.
Now, the Cardinals are not the only ones with problems. The Cincinnati Reds, if you listen to my preview with Gordon Wittenmeyer, they were talking about this young kid, Novelli Marte, who was probably going to get the most starts in third base. They got a lot of infielders in Cincinnati. He gets popped, Dustin, with an 80-game PED suspension, 80 games without pay for testing positive for boldenone, a performance-enhancing substance. So not good for the Reds. Speaking of the Reds, Dustin, Joey Votto finally found a team. He will be with the Toronto Blue Jays. So let's just kind of, I'm glad. I think the game is more fun with Joey Votto in it personally.
Yeah, no problem. It's not, as long as it's out of the Cubs hair for the most part. So
Yeah,
no
he
problem
always kills at Wrigley Field. So but I do, like I said, I enjoy him as a person. I think he's really good.
Good for
Dustin,
baseball. He's good for baseball.
Exactly. We get a day off tomorrow, a little day off, Cub fans, so you can listen to the Fly the W podcast, get all caught up. And then the games begin again Tuesday and Wednesday. You got the Brewers on Tuesday at Sloan Park, and then on Wednesday away against the Guardians. And by the time, Dustin, we record our next podcast, I will be in Mesa, Arizona for an exciting slate of games that are going to be coming up.
I'm really jealous, Crawly. Good for you to get out there. It's going to be awesome.
Yep, I am excited. So, hopefully, like I said, we're going to have tons of stuff for you guys to listen to and hopefully bring back to the podcast. So really kind of keep subscribing, downloading, telling all your friends about it, because we are going to have fun with this.
That's a wrap, Crawly. Like you just mentioned, don't forget to download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow on the socials, especially coming up when Crawly's out there in Mesa. Facebook, Instagram. Of course, we're on Twitter, Fly the W670 at gmail.com to send Crawly and I your thoughts. And you can watch us, as we mentioned, YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, have a good start to the week. We'll talk in a couple days.
Absolutely. And guess what? Michael Busch just hit his second home run, solo home run. Cubs out 2-0. Go Cubs. Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!